Okay, welcome back to Data Center Live London. Hope you've made the most of our networking break, but we're now going to move on to our next panel discussion. This is our multi-cloud forum. So who's going to be joining me over the next 45 minutes or so? Let me welcome our guests to you. We have Mike Milner, VP Cloud Technology at Trend Micro. Samta Bansal, Global Consulting Service Portfolio Marketing and Strategy Executive at Hitachi Vantara. And finally, Vittorio Viarengo, VP Cross Cloud at VMware. Hello and welcome to all of you. Great to see you all. So we've got lots to dig into here. We're looking at the benefits and challenges of multi-cloud strategies and also how to design for cost, reliability and performance too. So a question for you all, just to start with, what are the benefits of a multi-cloud strategy? Maybe Samta, perhaps you could go to you first.
Sure. I mean, see, the biggest benefit for multi-cloud is going to be anywhere, anytime operations, right? And ensure that business continuity. Because basically what multi-cloud allows you to do is choose vendors and provide flexibility to match your specifications and capabilities and optimize those workloads, right? Whether it is around speed, performance, reliability, geographical location, security, compliance, whatever it might be. So that is where it is like, you don't have to get stuck with a lunch menu, but you can actually go a la carte, right? So that's the advantage is best of breed solution. You can actually, avoid vendor lock-ins. It allows you the agility of the cloud because now data can reside closer to the place of need. So better customer experiences, less downtime. So all of those, right? So a lot of benefits, like I said, overall, you're able to provide operational excellence and customer experiences anytime, anywhere.
Of course. And Vittorio, what does that look like from a VMware perspective?
Cloud chaos. So what we found is that initially multi-cloud is a differentiating advantage because it's the path of least resistance for building great applications. So the developers have gone crazy and built great new applications. And so initially multi-cloud happened as an accident. And the majority of the customers are 87% are multi-cloud today. So as it is a reality, and it is the architecture for the foreseeable future, the most heterogeneous environment that IT has ever seen. But only 10, according to our studies, only 10-15% of customers are where Samta talked about, right? Where they're thinking strategically about it.
Absolutely.
Okay, I want to use whatever cloud fits the needs of my application. We call that cloud smart. But the majority of our customers are either in early stages where it's an accident, or in the cloud chaos, where literally now the CIOs are being asked, hey, what about cost? What about compliance? What about security? And these CIOs are literally telling us, I don't know, but half of this stuff is because the developers has gone crazy. And so I think that customers are on that journey, and eventually they'll get to this alignment stage where they can literally avoid lock-in and kind of mediate, especially with AI. You want to be able to say, hey, there's great innovation over there, let's move over there. Oh, there's great innovation in Azure, let's move. But it's only a minority right now.
Yeah, like Vittoria said, right? Means I would say it's everything but simple, right? And maybe it's actually complexity on steroids in a way to what you said, Vittoria, right? Cloud chaos.
Definitely, and obviously we touched upon some of the challenges there, but we'll come back to that in a sec. Mike, I'm just curious to hear your thoughts to that question.
Yeah, I just think it really has been an evolution. In the early days, it was avoiding vendor lock-in. You didn't want to get stuck with just one provider and worry about the costs might go up and how you're going to handle that. And I think increasingly it is trying to find the best tool for the job, particularly as I think Vittorio mentioned, new emerging technologies around machine learning, AI, being able to choose your best of breed vendor. But I think in the security mindset, and it is a major challenge, companies struggle to maintain even really in-depth security in one cloud, let alone multi-cloud. So it definitely does have pros and cons.
Yeah, sure. Just jumping back to you, Samta, because you mentioned there about geographical aspects, I believe. What are the kind of challenges that you see when it comes to operating on multi-clouds that are servicing different geographies?
Yeah, like Mike and Vittorio kind of alluded to a little bit to that is, you know, with geographies also comes that complexity, right? That you are actually, dividing your data, and you run into the risk of creating data siloed in these multi-cloud environments. So traditional data integration technologies now starts getting very complex and time consuming. So how do you actually adopt a robust data integration solution and management? That gets very important. Mike talked about cost, right? So think about number of video streaming services across the family members. It's really hard to figure out what does that monthly cost on a family looks like. Now here we are talking about the money to multiple cloud providers becoming very, very challenging, because each of them have different pricing structures. You do not know within your company what the usage is kind of going on. So optimizing those costs is a huge challenge. And then the other things is, I think Mike touched on it, huge security risk, right? So if you're looking at geographies, again, the idea is not only geographies in terms of security, compliance, regulations. Different regions have different regulations and compliance requirements. Are you following that? What does that security looks entails? Are you doing the 5C in terms of security? All of that becomes pretty challenging there.
Of course. And then Mike, maybe you could touch on that as well, because particularly I was going to ask as well about security, and particularly how you secure data in the cloud. Maybe you could touch upon that just a little bit.
It's hard to cover in just a little bit, but
maybe a
just
lot.
Yeah, exactly. Sampa's point there about the data, particularly when you're dealing with multi-locations for sovereignty purposes, you have certain data that needs to remain within a certain jurisdiction. That's incredibly complex, and every different jurisdiction has different requirements on where that data is shared, how it's shared, what even is considered personal data and what isn't.
Mm-hmm.
And managing all that complexity of data, and at the same time, the applications and infrastructure on top of that is incredibly complex. And that's even one cloud with multiple regions, let alone multi-clouds. We often hear from customers that they're looking for solutions that help unify. They want to see, that classic single pane of glass to manage all of these different resources and all of these different regions. But there's no silver bullet for these types of problems. Every company is different, but I think the opportunities are strong enough that companies really are tackling it, and the ones who do it well are definitely going to be differentiated.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like history in IT repeats itself, right? So there's always an explosion of innovation, and that creates heterogeneity. And then at some point, vendors, one or two or multiple vendors, create an abstraction layer that creates that unified view of things, right? VMware has done it with virtualization, right? We created this on-prem, this virtualization layer that made everything look the same, and allowed our customers to pool resources and go fast. I think the exact same things will happen in the cloud. I would argue that every company out there that is funded in Silicon Valley is a cross-cloud company.
Yeah.
By definition, because it's a pain point, as Mike and Samta just talked about. And if you're just providing a point solution for one hyperscaler, eventually that hyperscaler will move up the functionality will get in your way. And so I think that, and that's what VMware strategy is about. But forget about VMware. I think every company, Trend Microsystem, Hitachi, Datadog, Snowflake, you name it, they're all coming up with this idea of creating an abstraction layer that allows customers to get the best of breed, but have a single pane of glass so that they know what their stuff is, right? Visibility.
Mm-hmm.
That with visibility, how much am I spending on all these clouds? Then the next thing was, okay, now how do I create a management posture, a security posture that allows me to say, hey, this is what I want to see across my clouds, across my application, and that gets implemented. We're early stages of that market. Some analysts call it the super cloud. We call it cross-cloud services. Everybody has a terminology, but I think it's inevitable if we want to have multi-cloud at a sustainable cost, that a new level of abstraction will emerge above the hyperscalers.
Yeah, and I would add to what Vittorio said, right? In means abstraction, super important. But then this also calls for, how do you actually have that cloud management layer, that managing the complexity between all of these different cloud vendors, right? That I think is going to be where a little bit of innovation and change management needs to happen. Again, technology is getting very sophisticated, but at the same time, very, very complex, right? So managing all of those also is becoming where, we quite often see the skill gaps, because not everybody, all the developers are actually understanding everything as it relates to security for one cloud vendor, let alone multiple cloud vendors, right? So all of these, how do you bring together and think about not only application data, but think about like workloads, which includes application data as well as infrastructure. I think exactly to Vittorio's and Mike's point, it is an interesting time, but actually at the same time chaotic, that we all have to start trying to understand and manage it appropriately.
Yeah, you mentioned the skills gap, particularly on the security side. It's almost become so normal now that skills gap almost implies that we're eventually going to fill the gap. But I think increasingly people are just accepting that there will never be enough highly skilled people to do everything that needs to be done, whether that's security or development.
Yeah.
And we used to think of the tools that we built as tools, right? Like, here's your toolbox. You, expert security person, can use these tools to secure your environment. And increasingly, that doesn't work anymore. They need a platform that will tell them how to be secure, or tell them how to optimize, or tell them how to do it. Smarter tools to help you optimize. Like Vittorio said, that layer above everything.
And let's talk some specifics, right? So in the security area, and I'm sure you have a solution in that area too. If you are a security professional that needs to learn how to encrypt data on Azure, Google, and Oracle, they all do it differently, right?
Yes.
And now there are tools out there from multiple vendors that allow a security professional to say, I want my data to always be encrypted when it gets stored, doesn't matter where. And that tool will figure out, okay, this is the knobs over here, this is knob over there, and does it. Same with application development or SCOS. So like for application development, developers want to say, hey, I want to build a piece of code. I don't want to be bothered with how to make it scale with Kubernetes, because there are 12 different Kubernetes distributions. So there are tools for companies like VMware and now the name escapes me, for other companies, but basically that allow to create policy in one place and say, hey, if I develop a microservice that manages confidential data, it can only talk to microservices that are also encrypted. And so you set that policy once, and that it doesn't matter where you deploy. So these things are emerging today. The use cases are concrete, which allows vendors to go and address those problems.
And to that point, right, what we are realizing, it's really hard in this multi-cloud world to say one size fits all. So, what we are noticing is that every customer engagement is slightly different, because the kind of tools and methodologies and processes that they go around and the kind of regulations and compliance needs they have is very different. So how do you actually create that integrated platform, so to say, that Mike said, is by leveraging what they have, what constraints they are living in is going to be super important, right? So again, tools are just a vehicle, but how do you augment it with the methodologies and process in order to make it their own? So what we like to say is your cloud, your way, because truly it is not one size fits all. And we are saying like so many different kind of deployments out there with our customers.
Yeah, that's a good point. just because you're multi-cloud, you don't want to use the lowest common denominator, the worst common denominator. You want to be able to go in and use those specialized features where it makes sense.
Yeah, but absolutely, there's a reason why people go multi-cloud. But the idea is that instead of, say that you have 10 people, you don't want to train 10 people on 3 clouds, right? You want to say, okay, we're going to have a Google expert that know how to set up the Google ML engine. But when it comes to developing the microservice, I want to be able to have that development lifecycle management be the same across clouds. So there are tools for that. And then, of course, somebody will have to go and configure SQL inside Azure and all that. Absolutely. That's a great point.
Sure, definitely. I mean, we got through such a long stream of conversation there. I'll nip off for half an hour, and I'll come back when the conversation's over. No, it's great to hear the enthusiasm about this topic, and I'm curious because we talked a lot about obviously multi-cloud, which is in the name of this topic, but I want to know a bit more about the difference between multi-cloud and hybrid cloud. Maybe Mike, you could probably delve into that a little bit for us first.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think pretty much every organization that hasn't started only in the cloud by necessity is hybrid cloud. Everyone has some assets, some workloads that either because of legacy, think big banks or something, and have old mainframes that are still critical to their business. Those are running on-prem. Or increasingly, we're having conversations with manufacturing organizations where it's not legacy, it's locality. They need that data close to where the manufacturing is happening, either for low latency or business continuity that they want to be able to keep producing. So this is not something that's going away. Hybrid cloud isn't in the past. It really is the way of working for any company where you've got your own resources in your own environment and you're using the cloud.
I'll give you a definition of legacy that I heard from a customer. Legacy, stuff that works. So and delivers value. So for us, we don't really see the difference. We always think about hybrid cloud as part of the multi-cloud equation.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah. So it's like, because even if you're on-prem, you're operating on-prem, you want to adopt a cloud model with high-level automation. And so increasingly, there are technologies that allow you to do that on-prem. So you look at on-prem as one of many options. And I think with ML especially, there will be a resurgence. There are 2 or 3 reasons why there actually a resurgence of on-prem cloud, private cloud. One is cost. People are realizing that not every workload needs to go in the cloud because it's more expensive. 2, is the ML. Increasingly, people want to do the training of these models on their own private data. And the third one is that coming out of the pandemic and the supply chain issues, people have looking at their data center, they're obsolete, and they're like, okay, I want to modernize them. I finally can do it. And so those are, to me, the 3 reasons why there is new excitement about the private cloud as part of this multi-cloud movement.
Yeah. So, and Vittorio, you hit that, right? Because I think multi-cloud does not have to include private cloud component, but they can, which means that in that case, multi-cloud can be hybrid cloud, right? So the main difference between a traditional, when you talk about hybrid cloud architecture and a multi-cloud architecture, is where the non-cloud resources are located, right? So typically in a hybrid cloud environment, you think that the non-cloud resources like authentication, VDI, security, they can run on-premises servers, storage, or networks. Whereas in multi-cloud, all of that are running in the cloud. Now, actually, we are also seeing this new operating model, which sits in between, which is distributed cloud, right? Where actually now because exactly what Mike said, because of IoT, because of AI at the edge, all of that are requiring things to be done at the edge or in the data center. In that case, there is this mix that is coming together where we have multiple clouds, we have this edge device, and yet we need a management layer on top of it, which could stay actually within the cloud managing all of those. And that's where the distributed cloud is coming into picture as well. So it is getting fairly complex in that sense. If multi-cloud wasn't complex like we were talking about, think about that another layer of complexity that is added on essentially.
Sure. So just make sure I understand this correctly. So I guess what you're saying here is from kind of a hybrid cloud situation to a multi-cloud situation. Effectively, what we have there is the digital transformation aspect. Correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe one of you might want to elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, say if I look, means all of what we are talking is part of digital transformation. Because if I think about digital transformation, for every enterprise, it's about value creation and be agile to create customer experience and operational excellence, right? And in order to do that, underpinned into that is, how do I modernize to innovate at scale? And that is what the multi-cloud or hybrid cloud that we are talking about is all about. That is, how do I set up my foundation in such a way that I can repeat the new customer experiences, keep creating operational excellence, and create value not only for my own company, but for my customers as well. And that's what multi-cloud strategies are going to enable you, by transforming how you design, develop, and deliver these applications at a rapid scale across the clouds, right? So that's the whole idea. I don't know, Vittorio and Mike, would you like to add something?
I'd just like to add, it's worth noting, we deal with the cloud all day long as our job. So I personally, anyway, tend to think like, well, companies are in this stage, but I like to remind myself that actually, in terms of numbers, not that many companies are fully adopted into the cloud. It's still actually something quite new for a lot of organizations.
Yeah.
And we often talk about hybrid cloud in terms of that cloud journey, right? You're still on-prem, you're still in an old data center, and you're starting your journey to the cloud. Every company's at a different phase in that journey.
Absolutely.
For some companies, even one cloud is still a very new concept that requires a lot of organizational change, whereas others, are well along that journey. So it really is a spectrum.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yep, Mike, spot on.
Yeah, to me, we introduced this concept of defense and offense, right? So we find that 93% of companies out there are, more than 90% of companies are concerned about the economics times ahead, or the geopolitical instability, interest rate, and all that. And in an environment like that, you have to, sometimes they want to play defense and say, okay, how do I increase my level of automation so I can save money? How do I look at my costs and try to optimize and all that? But also, I think that if slow economic times often provide the environment for companies to emerge as leaders, right? When people retrench, there's an opportunity. So I think that the people that are more advanced with their use of cloud, they can play offense and say, okay, how am I going to create a new digital experience for my bank users that will steal the young generation from these other banks, or that, and in any, if we can think experience, of course, in any environment. And so I think this is a combination of playing defense and offense is what multi-cloud allows you to do if you do it right.
That's terrific point, Vittorio. Completely agree. Yep.
Yeah, particularly in these times, people underestimate the ability to efficiently scale down as well. To
Exactly.
not spend when you don't need to.
Yep, absolutely.
So in those circumstances, then obviously you talked there about some of the reasons why customers are effectively reluctant to adopt more in terms of cloud, etc. How do you kind of get through to them that, okay, this is where the competition is, this is where you'll start to see through digital transformation a lot more success for your business?
Well, I wouldn't spend time with those customers because they're going to be out of business. Look, I'm trying to be provocative here, but to me, and there are customers in some regulated industries, the government sometimes, where, okay, that's fine, corner case. But for the most part, if you're not doing clouds today,
Yeah.
if you're not looking how to disrupt your own business with AI today, somebody else will. And it's like being in 95 and looking at, oh, this internet is a FUD.
Mhm.
And so I think if is a Darwin at work. If customers are not looking at adopting the clouds and filling that skill gaps that everybody has, and if you have developers that know the cloud, oh my God, pamper them, keep them happy, because that's the way for you to innovate and become and stay competitive or disrupt your own industry.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
Can I
mentioned
get an
developers.
amen on that?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I just got reminded of, um, a saying from Jeff Immelt from GE. He said, if you went to bed as a hardware company, you have to wake up as a software company. I feel like, Vittoria, you have to wake up as a cloud company. It's so important right now. Is like without it, probably you won't survive too long. Like Vittoria said, it has to be in some form of capacity for you to be competitive, for you to be agile in this new world.
Yeah, maybe some selection bias, but I never have conversations anymore about should I be using the cloud.
Right.
It's always about how.
Yeah.
And Vittorio, you mentioned developers who are, hungry to use all these new cloud technologies. That's almost always where we see the friction. Developers want to use the cloud, security teams want to use the cloud, but there's a bit of a disagreement or shift of culture on who has control over certain things.
Mm-hmm.
In the past, developers wrote their applications to fit the infrastructure that the organization had. That's really switched in the cloud. Now developers are writing the infrastructure as code to fit the application. And that changes a lot of the power dynamic, particularly around security. So we
Those
see a
days are
lot of
over.
cultural differences and changes.
Developers, they don't want to have anybody sitting between them and getting that code into production.
Exactly.
And I think over time, with first for DevOps, now platform engineering, Kubernetes, there are now technologies that allow you to do that. But I think the key is, speaking of skill gap, the operation teams that's what I tell every CIO that I meet. Set up a platform engineering team. Start with one person, goes and learn how developers write code today, how to deploy multiple times a day, what kind of tools they're using. They're using tons of open source. You just got to embrace it. And now train your team so that they fit that workflow. And they can lay down the track to say, hey, developers, write your code, but lay on the tracks on this Kubernetes distribution that I know it's sound, has been secure, has been patched, and so that workflow doesn't create friction. And those that are doing that are the ones that are emerging as leaders. To me, I love developers. I was a developer in my previous life, and look, at the end of the day, think about all the stuff that we talk about in IT. We're here to do one very simple thing: support the development and deployment of application. Why? Because applications is how we make money and how we save money, right? And so developers.
Right. And to that point, Vittorio, right, means that is what I think is the need today. Is right now the developers and the IT operations are kind of siloed and separated. And given the multi-cloud complexity, I think now is the time where the IT and DevOps team have to come closer together, because any failures or any reliability issues shouldn't be an afterthought. It has to be integrated. So we talk about this as engineering led operations, right? Where you're designing for reliability, you're designing for cost, you're designing for security, and not only thinking that, oh, I will throw it off the wall and let IT ops manage it for me, right? And that's where I think that coming together, that cultural change is super important in that engineering led operations. And you're spot on. The companies who are able to bring those two disciplines together, where site reliability engineering, data reliability engineering is actually integrated in the design process, will actually win, because that's the nugget, is how do you combine these two in an effective way in this like cloud chaos, like you said, Vittorio, right? It's in this complex world.
Sorry, I thought Mike was going to continue there. It seemed like you were gonna.
I could talk for days, Tom.
I know.
Talk for days.
No, that's fantastic. I mean, so from the skills gap perspective, then, just so I'm clear, is that the skills gap effectively is on the customer side in terms of their teams working with the developers to kind of implement these solutions. They're really the ones that could potentially be holding back the company from adopting multi-cloud much faster.
Yeah, because like I said, that, shortage of cloud professionals, first of all, who understand multiple cloud platforms, right? That itself. So forget the customer. How many developers today, or, skills professionals we have that can understand multiple cloud platforms? How many of them are there who can actually understand, what does SRE, what does like site reliability engineering or data reliability engineering means, and how it has to be embedded into the design agility phase as well. So all of that cross-pollination of the skill set is very important. And that is where the multi-cloud professional skill set is something that is now building out to be. So it is lack of skill set and certified professionals that can encompass this complexity is one thing. And then certainly in the organizations itself, that kind of proficiency is really, really hard to find or develop. So lean on to service providers who might have skill sets there, and they are building out that kind of cross-pollinated, stack engineers, full stack engineers to do that.
Yeah, we have never spoken to a company that has more security people than developer people. As Vittorio mentioned, the core focus of that business is those developers to deliver that value to the end user, right? So often you'll see multiple development teams where maybe one development team just uses AWS. They're delivering that application. And another development team just uses Azure. So they're using that platform. So they can specialize to deliver that value. But the security team has to somehow manage all of those. And that's that multi-cloud skill that's really hard to get.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. I just want to kind of paint a picture now then. So for example, if I'm with an organization that is looking to shift from on-prem infrastructure to cloud solutions, what would be the best way to migrate from a security perspective?
Yeah, I'll maybe jump in on that. There's definitely differences in security in the cloud versus security in an on-prem environment, but there's a lot of commonalities as well. So usually we hear or even recommend use your security tools that you're either comfortable with, or use ones that can support both environments. And pretty much every provider today will support hybrid environments. But don't look at it as, hey, we're using this cloud thing, so we need to start all of our security from scratch in the cloud. Use the same tools that map across, like if you're talking about workload or server endpoint security, those tools can cross that boundary. And then look into the cloud side of the tools that augment with things that are cloud specific, like cloud security posture management, or increasingly we're hearing conversations around CNAPP, cloud native application protection platforms. A bit of a mouthful, but that way you're getting the security on your on-prem environment, because like we said earlier, that's not going to go away. You will continue to have to support that. But then the same tool mapping across to the cloud. That gets you closer to that single pane of glass, but handles the things that are specific about the cloud and on-prem.
Yeah, I would, if I can make the question a little more wider than security, I think speaking of application, I will start with application. We have this methodology in our professional service team, and there are a lot of professional service companies that do the same, where you basically look at your applications, right? And you say, okay, as I'm moving to the cloud because I want to be more agile, or maybe want to build application, whatever is the reason, you have to look at some applications will doesn't make sense to me to move to the cloud. They're old application. No, you don't even have the source code. They're efficient the way they are. Leave them there. Let them die there, right? Then you have a bunch of applications that, as you move to the cloud, they'll go away. They'll become SaaS, right? If you're doing your own file and servers on-prem, when you go to the cloud, you're going to use OneDrive. You're going to use Google Drive, something like that, right? So those are going to go away. Then there will be applications like, why do we still run these applications? So you kill them. And then there are new applications you're going to be building. And that's where multi-cloud is great, because you say, hey, I want to do ML. I'm going to go with Google, because actually probably now Microsoft, but whatever. And then and these applications actually say that you're a bank and you have a monolithic application that has a piece of code that, given a zip code, will give you the average cost of a house. Okay. I want to reuse that as part of the new application. Okay, great. Let's move it to the cloud, and now let's decompose it and refactor the application so that it can be reused and recomposed in new, interesting ways. So it all starts from the application. Figure out and then everything that Mike said about security posture, it applies. But I think I would always start with the need of the application, and in turn support the need of the business.
Yeah. And I completely agree, right? And we have, like any consultant, we have a unique, at least at Hitachi Vantara, what we call E3 methodology, which is around how do you envision, which means that understanding your portfolio and understanding what the application requirements and ultimate goals are. And to what Vittorio said, you evaluate and then you measure, how fast you need to get there, whether you need to refactor, re-architect, re-platform, retire, whatever that strategy might be, depending on the end goal for your portfolio and your applications. You then evaluate that, and then you go ahead and execute. But at the same time, what we also say is it doesn't have to be perfected. So we say evolve, right? So continue the journey, know how to pivot, fail fast, learn fast, and continue the path, right? So that is definitely the methodologies. Start with the intent, what exactly this application was supposed to do, and what's the best way to, deliver that outcome that this application needs to provide, will determine how it should be constructed and where it needs to live. So it is not a hybrid cloud, multi-cloud discussion. It's cloud just becomes an operating model, right? And where it needs to live and how it needs to run is mainly governed by the intent for which you are actually building those applications.
Yeah. And at VMware, we have evolved our portfolio, because initially, 5-6 years ago, we started to see the advent of multi-cloud. We took our vSphere engine and ported it to all the hyperscalers. And that now is really flying off the shelves, because we have customers that are moving hundreds of applications in months, because they have the same environment on both sides, and so they can just vMotion their applications. But then we also realize customers are in the cloud natively and building new applications there. And so with the tons of portfolio, we have built a complete solution to support multi-cloud development of native applications. So I think many companies are going there. So going back to this concept of a super cloud, how do we create this abstraction layer, this way for customers to leverage the best of each world, but at the same time get some consistency to their costs don't go crazy.
Yeah. I just thought about, Chat GPT, maybe that, it's going to write code anyway, cloud native codes. Sorry.
What they say about Chat GPT, what they say about that, they say that everybody's concerned that Chat GPT and generative AI is coming for your job. But the reality is that somebody that knows how to use ChatGPT is coming for your job.
Yeah, that's right. And I don't know, Mike, how you feel about that. Tom, sorry, we are taking it to the tangent, so apologies.
No, it was about time that the conversation kind of dipped into ChatGPT at some point. But
I was going to say it's hard to have a conversation without it coming up, and like multiple things in the past. I remember a lot of conversations about big data, and it's definitely going to have an impact. It's going to change the world. I think a lot of people are maybe, like you said, imagining a lot of doomsday scenarios of jobs lost and things like that. But I think, like anything, we're going to adapt hopefully quickly enough. But wow, it doesn't definitely disrupt a lot of things.
Yeah, and from a security and regulations and all of that, that is top of my mind, right? When you start talking about that, yet another layer of complexity that it would add, it'll be very interesting.
But talking about multi-cloud and AI, you see already very early days for generative AI, and you already start seeing open source project like Ray that are trying to create that abstraction layer that says you can use Ray to create your models, and doesn't matter what is the backend. And so I think that now that multi-cloud is the architecture, you see new technology coming out of the gate with some of this support for multi-cloud built in. So
yeah, and also in terms of automation, right? Where now when we look at the cloud management complexity, the IT ops part of it that I was talking about, right? The AI-driven automation and Gen AI will play a big role in how we can help automate that part of the equation as well for multi-cloud in order to make this complexity a little bit, hopefully simpler.
Yeah, and more we get questions about what about attackers using things like ChatGPT to become even more aggressive or scale even more rapidly. So it's going to be an exciting time for sure.
For sure, yes.
Sure, I think we should have doubled up on this conversation because we could go on for another length of time, I think. But no, I'm just going to finish off because we've got a few minutes left. So I want to talk a little bit about this idea of vendor lock-in. And I think I wanted to refer to your point, Vittorio, previously about kind of shifting from legacy to digital and multi-cloud services. Is vendor lock-in an issue when it comes to that transition?
I didn't think it was such an issue initially, because I thought the advantages of going to the cloud and getting the innovation would outweigh that. But now pretty much every customer I talk to brings it up. And so that tells me that people are, as a matter of fact, yesterday I was briefing a customer and he said, they're multi-cloud. They said, you name a cloud, we have it. And now we're worried about too much concentration. So I think that's at the back of the mind. As I said, only 10-15% of customers have a mature multi-cloud operation. And so those are the ones that can actually deal with that and start to mediate. And those are the ones that are more likely to use something like Ray as they adopt, because they already learned the lesson. So they say, hey, if I'm doing AI, I'm going to use Ray. So I can move my workloads and do ML wherever I want. I think the 85% of the customers out there are concerned about lock-in, but they don't have yet the tools to address it.
Yeah, and also, I mean, say the reason multi-cloud or distributed clouds will be also added benefit is that, at least you are not relying on one single vendor. So if the service quality declines on one vendor side, you can shift your business towards other vendors that you are working with anyway. So you can continue to drive innovation, because in this SaaS world, right, a cloud vendor can decide any day to kill their product, completely ice it. So that danger lives all the time, which in multi-cloud world now you can actually help mitigate that risk, right? So all of those kind of things, I think in vendor multi-cloud solves for that as well, that you're not logged in one vendor, but you can actually hedge your bets, basically, right? Diversify your portfolio, that they say. That's what I think helps in this case, so that you're not logged in one vendor, but you have multiple to work with.
Yeah, and I'll agree with Vittoria and Samta, I think most of the companies we talk to are in that kind of multi-cloud perspective. But I just wanted to add in kind of the counter opinion. We certainly do have conversations with customers who have just made the decision that these, particularly the big, let's say the big three cloud providers, have now reached the stage where they are big enough and moving fast enough that they're willing to just double down and not go multi-cloud. I mean, they're still multi-cloud, but more heavily invest in one over the others and just accept the lock-in in order to move faster. So I think that is a spectrum as well, but I'll definitely agree the predominant opinion is that multi-cloud approach to.
Yeah, but I would argue, because every stats you look at, from our stats to Gartner, 87% of customers are multi-cloud. What I would argue that a lot of the customers are saying we are in one cloud, they are in denial.
You're probably right.
Another anecdote. At our user conference, I was running a roundtable like this, and I started going around and saying, "How is your multi-cloud journey going?" And the first customer was a bank and said, "Oh no, we're on-prem and AWS." So okay, great. So 2 clouds, great. Next, and they go, "Well, the business units are using Azure." So, okay, so great. And then next, "Oh well, we just bought a company that uses Google."
Yes.
Yeah, that's a big
exactly. I think I was reading a research, Vittoria, which said about, typically on an average 4 to 5 clouds, which I was like kind of, wow, but you're absolutely right, because now line of businesses have much autonomy that they go, exactly, because they are not limited by what central IT is governing, right? So yeah, you see.
I used to joke about the 5 stages. Now we talk about cloud first, cloud chaos, and cloud smart. And I used to joke there used to be denial, euphoria. Oh, look, we're going fast. We have all these clouds. Developers are happy. Then panic attack. And then you get to, well, how do we deal with this? And then you have the enlightenment. So the 5 stages of multi-cloud adoption.
That's funny.
Sure.
Yes. Yeah.
A great point to end on there. I think unfortunately we don't have any more time, but I know we could chat about this for another good hour or so, maybe even more. But no, thank you very much, everyone. We're gonna wrap that up now. But thank you all for joining us at Data Center Live in New York.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great conversation.
Take care. Bye.
Okay, we're going to have to wrap things up there for now. Thanks to all of you for joining us here at Data Center Live London. Up next, we're talking cloud and 5G, so do stay with us.